This is Talk with John here on Main Street Media, obviously. Looking forward to having you join me for the next roughly 2 hours. I'll be introducing my guest momentarily, but real quickly, you can reach us on Twitter, Rumble, YouTube, and obviously you can go to our website, mainstreetmedia.com. Look forward to having you with us and joining us for the next 2 hours. Obviously, we're going to be posting, I'm going to be retweeting this on Twitter and looking forward to having you folks watch it later. You can share it, send this to other people you know, because I think I'm bringing a subject matter that is specific, well, not specific to the state of Utah, but definitely involves a citizen in the state of Utah that I think you're going to be interested to hear about. And I think it's going to be something it'll be a conversation that you're going to enjoy. But before we get going any further, typically Tuesdays from 4 to 6, right here on Main Street Media, you can catch me. I have not been on the last 2 weeks because I have had a son in primary children's hospital in Lehigh that I have been taking care of. And it seemed like every Tuesday we had x-rays or decisions to make, and I needed to talk to doctors, and you never know exactly when they're coming in, so I wasn't able to do the show. So that's why I have not been on. My son is doing great, health back to normal activity. He just had a quirky thing that happened with a small percentage of people that happen to be tall and grow real fast. So if you've got a son that grows and tall real quickly, you have a chance to have what happened to us, and that was a collapsed lung for him. Um, there's a bunch of doctor stuff, and I won't go into that. But the bottom line is he's healthy. It was his second time happening, so we had an additional surgery from the first time from what happened. That happened back in June. So look forward to being with you for the next 2 hours. And he just got out of the hospital just the other day. So back to life as normal as it is. And thank heavens we are out of the hospital. But major blessed to be in the United States, a major blessing to be in the US and in Western medicine that we can get that taken care of. Now, dad has to pay for the hospital bill and the ambulance ride. All right, so real quickly, I want to give out my show prayer and show mantra. No need to bow your head, close your eyes. Just the prayer of my heart when it comes to doing this show. I hope my show is a gift back to my forefathers, the founding fathers, and may it be an acceptable token to our Father above. And then the show mantra. Where there is liberty, there is the Spirit of Christ. Where the Spirit of Christ is, there will be liberty. And the greater the Spirit of Christ, the greater liberty will be. That's the mantra of this show. And that's where all liberty and freedom come from. So, joining me now, I want to bring on my guest for the next hour, Nate Jones. And we're waiting for the assist. There we go. I'm going to be able to let him in now. There we go. Nate Jones, thanks for joining me. Appreciate you being here today.
Well, thanks for having me, and I hope it's a good conversation.
I think we're going to have a very good one. So, folks, Nate Jones has how I got aware of him. I had some other business people in business mention him to me, what his company's going through. Then also he was on Alex Jones' show recently, InfoWars. I want to say it's been about 3 weeks to a month or something in that neighborhood, and got to hear his story on InfoWars. Frankly, I think it's worth listening to, but we're going to cover that. And we're also going to cover some of that same ground, what's happening to him, but also from a perspective of Utah and the federalist system and what states need to be doing. That was what, and as he was telling his story, that was my biggest frustration. I was like, where is my state involved in this? Where's my civic leaders involved in this? Where's my governor? Where's my Nate business? I believe Nate lives in the same county I do here in Utah County. I'm like, where's my sheriff? Where's our attorney general? Where is the district attorney for Utah County? Where are these individuals taking care of a citizen of the state of Utah and claiming. And why does that matter? Because we need to claim the protection for the citizens and businesses of Utah. Now, obviously, we're going to get more into the story, but first, I want to quickly, and I had his info pulled up. Let's see. Nope, not that screen. Oh, for heaven's sakes. Here we go. Go to the next screen. Just a little bit. Let me tell you a little bit about Nathan Jones. Nate Jones is the founder of Xlear Inc. in 2000 to improve lives by making Xlear nasal spray commercially available and spreading the message of proactive health. Prior to this venture, he attended college for a year, spent a year in active duty, and also went on a 2-year mission with his church. Afterwards, he made a transition to become a commercial diver. Worked in the oil fields of Louisiana between 1995 and 2000. Well, I find that to be a very, very interesting story. Okay, technically, were you a deep sea diver, what they consider a deep sea diver?
Yes.
Okay. So, those guys supposedly have years taken off their lives from time to time.
Nah, that's an old wives' tale.
I sure hope that's the case because, Nate, we need you around fighting this battle for years to come. Nate and I are pretty close to age. In fact, I don't think I ever found out exactly how old he was, but I've got more gray hair than he does. So we'll assume that and I'm not as handsome. So we'll assume that I'm the older of the two. So, Nate, your company had the federal government come after him. I want to say both the I get screwed up on these different names of the groups, but I want to say it was like the FTC, the FDA. Different people have taken a look at it. Yeah, one part of the government says, "Oh, we're not really concerned about them," and the other part of the government wants to attack you and tear you apart. Tell us what happened.
No, the FDA, which you would think would be the one that would actually be involved in this, they actually declined. We have the emails, but they declined because in their opinion, there wasn't a case. And really what it comes down to is the FTC sued us, but in my opinion, I think they sued us because when we gave them studies backing up what we said, I don't think that they wanted to listen to us. And I think it was hubris on the part of the attorneys at the FTC that really had this go from there. And I mean, we'll get into it and I'll explain why that is, but after everything that we've gone through, it's nothing but hubris.
And why I brought up the FDA, because if I remember correctly from our conversation, it was the FTC, and hearing you with Alex Jones, it was a different organization. I think it's very important. One government organization that, frankly, I think should have had the biggest concern for what you guys were doing said, no issue here. We don't see an issue. We don't have an issue with it. So you have one branch of the government saying no, and you have another branch going, we got to get our 1,000 pounds of flesh, not a pound of flesh. We've got to get 1,000 pounds of flesh. So I wanted to make that distinction clear that there was a branch of the government that said, no, we don't see anything here. So let's continue.
And not only did they say that, but that's the branch of the government that actually has scientists that understand what we're talking about in it.
Right.
The FTC is a bunch of lawyers, and even when we sent them data and studies, they never even looked at it. As we deposed them going through this, they acknowledged that when we sent them studies, they didn't read the studies. They didn't even open the studies. And what they acknowledged is it wasn't in the news. It wasn't on NBC or CNN or MSNBC. So it couldn't have possibly been true. Therefore, we need to go after this person.
Because it wasn't in the, I'm going to say, Democrat mainstream media.
Yes.
That their messaging also paid for by big pharma, advertising
Correct.
done by big pharma. I mean, how many times do we see at the beginning of a news broadcast brought to you by Pfizer? We've all
Yes.
seen those clips.
Yep.
Hundreds of clips of brought to you by Pfizer, supposedly news stations. Let me tell you a little bit. I have a small understanding of the way that those groups work. When you get billions of dollars in advertising, you don't go after the hand that bites, the hand that feeds you. Don't let it become the hand that bites you. Little detour, tiny little detour. I am convinced that we know for a fact that more deaths are caused by alcohol than by firearms. I'm convinced if there was as many commercials being run about firearms over the last 50, 60 years as alcohol, no one would be going after firearms. So that's a point to keep in the back of your mind, folks. All right, let's continue. So your company, Xlear, provides a lot of different products. One of those happens to be
Hey, can I add something to that real quick?
Please do. Fire away.
You just said something, and I had to look it up on my computer. But you know what is also a little absurd? Is that pharmaceuticals,
yes,
when used appropriately, kill 2.5 times as many people as firearms do. Pharmaceutical products, when used as recommended by the pharmaceutical company and the physician, kill 2.5 times more people than firearms do in the United States.
Yes. And, the numbers behind the deaths of people receiving treatment far exceed that even. So I'm glad so you get where I'm going a little bit with that thought process. So let's talk about Xlear, so you went from being a student in school, served a 2-year mission for your church, and then became a deep sea diver, and then decided to start up your business. Sounds like you've always had an entrepreneurial mindset. But what made you decide, hey, I want to start up this business?
So the story behind, I should probably tell the story behind the nasal spray and why it is and why it matters, and really why it matters to everybody in this country. But what we deal with is a product. It's called xylitol. It's a sugar. It's a natural sugar. It is not an artificial sugar. Next time you eat corn on the cob, break the cob in half and suck on the cob, and you're going to get a sweet taste. That sweet taste is xylose, and that's where the xylitol comes from. They actually make it out of corn cobs. Okay, not the corn kernel, because that's full of 6 carbon sugars, but the corn cob. And you go back in World War II, the Finnish people didn't have any supply of sugar. And so they actually started making xylitol and utilizing, because it tastes like sugar, looks like sugar, all that other good stuff. And it wasn't until about 20 years later that the dentist started noticing that the kids that had grown up during the war didn't have tooth decay. Okay? And that's what they went to go look at. And it wasn't that they didn't have tooth decay 20 years ago, it's that their whole life since then, they weren't having cavities.
Wow.
Okay? And I'll explain why that is. But they started doing research in the 60s to try to understand what was going on. Why these kids that ate xylitol while their adult teeth were erupting in their mouths as children, why those kids still were not having tooth decay. And what they found after, decades of research was that xylitol is actually working to change the microbiome in your mouth to bacteria that don't create acid. And if you can cause that shift, you're going to have long-term protection. And here in the United States, if you want to sell a product that says it prevents tooth decay, it has to have fluoride. Okay, there aren't any other consumer products. You go into the store, nothing in there is going to say fights tooth decay, prevents tooth decay, anything like that, unless it has, between 900 and 1100 parts per million of fluoride. Okay, but the interesting part of that is that fluoride doesn't actually treat the infection. It never has, and dentists and the ADA have never argued that it does. All it does is it helps your teeth to resist decay. It resists the effect of the infection, because what's happening is you have strep mutans in your mouth. That bacteria is metabolizing sugar and creating acid, and that acid dissolves your teeth. So by making your enamel stronger, you're just allowing the infection to fester and sit there and fester and grow. By utilizing xylitol to change the microbiome so you get rid of the strep mutans, you get rid of the infection.
Okay, I don't know the answer to this question, folks, but does it also affect your bones besides just your teeth, or is it because of what's going on?
What is it? Are you talking about fluoride or xylitol?
Xylitol.
So xylitol, there have been some studies, and it's not something they really look into. And in fact, it's been so long ago that I can't remember exactly what it is, but I know that it helps your calcium mineralization in your bones. I know that fluoride actually I don't want to say causes, but it's a co-indicator for osteoporosis. And the reason why is you want your enamel to be strong, really strong. It doesn't bend. Your bones should be flexible. But if you're eating fluoride, if you're drinking fluoride or water with fluoride in it, that's becoming systemic, and that actually makes your bones harder. It makes your bones more brittle.
Right, makes them more brittle. Yes.
Okay, and so that's one of the negative side effects of fluoride.
So I was curious. I'm like, I wonder if it affects the rest of the bones. And like I said, I'm sorry to go off on that little question, but
well, that's actually a good question, and I should know the answer to that. And I know that a long time I knew it. I just, in 25 years, I've learned a lot about xylitol, and I've forgotten a lot too.
Okay, well, actually, this is what I like to say with my age. My memory is 100% perfect. My recall is definitely not 100% perfect. And I did give you something completely out of the blue. So it's just something that popped into my mind, and that's what I do from time to time. All right, so continuing on. So let's get back into the founding of the company, Xylitol, and how did you go about bringing this product to market?
So the story behind it is when these dentists were all doing research in the 80s and 90s, there was hundreds, thousands of studies that have been done now. But when they were doing the studies, what they started noticing in all this data they collect is that kids that were using the xylitol chewing gum to prevent tooth decay, not only were they not getting cavities, but they were also, just by chewing gum with xylitol, having 42% fewer ear infections, respiratory infections. And that's a huge number. I mean, that's bigger money-wise than reducing tooth decay to practically nil.
Right.
But they're dentists. They didn't care. They're looking at the teeth. And so that all of that data stayed in footnotes until PubMed came along. And when PubMed came along and came online in 97, 98, that was the first time that medical and dental journals were collated in the same database. And my dad, being a physician, he was looking for something to prevent ear infections in babies. And so when he queried on there, what kept coming up was dental studies. Well, you can't give a baby chewing gum. And so he didn't really know what to do. And then a paper was published in 1998, Journal of Antimicrobial Chemotherapy. And what that study showed was that xylitol blocks the ability of these pathogens, strep pneumo, H. flu, MCAT, from adhering to the tissue. And if you block that ability of that pathogen, of that bacteria to adhere to the tissue, you're obviously not going to get sick as much, because those pathogens have to adhere in order to affect you. So he read that and he goes, well, if it starts in the nose, why aren't we putting xylitol in their nose? So he bought some saline, put some xylitol into it, shook it up, started squirting out their nose with it. And the kids stopped getting sick. And kids that have chronic ear infections and chronic respiratory infections usually have other, I don't want to say comorbidities because they're not killing them, but they have other illnesses like allergies and asthma, because you have this mucus buildup in your upper airway. I don't want to say snot, but you have that, and you've got to get that cleaned out. And when my dad started utilizing this on these kids, not only did they stop getting sick, but it cleared up a lot of their other issues.
I'm making a note. I'm going to have to do a little bit of looking into that. I've got some asthma issues. We don't have ear infections so much in our family, but I do have a few people that have asthma and asthmatic issues. So I should have paid
Well,
attention to that sooner.
most of the triggers, and again, I want to make everybody know I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving you medical advice. I am just telling you what we have learned in 25 years. But most of your asthmatics, the triggers are in the upper airway. And so if you keep that upper airway clean, you should have fewer incidences of an asthma attack.
Okay, not a doctor. Let's be clear, Nate. You've never claimed to be a doctor, not necessarily giving medical advice. But I also wonder how that does for people that have allergies. I wonder if that could drop that.
Well, okay. So we started the company in 2000, and we only talked about blocking bacterial adhesion because that's the only thing we knew it did. Within about 4 or 5 years, you want to grow the company. You're looking at how to expand your product line. And we started reaching out to a number of our customers and asking, how do you like the product? What's it doing? What do you use it for? And what we found out was at that point, about 75% of our customers were actually buying it for allergies. And we sat there and we said, okay, that kind of caught us off guard. We called in the physician brain trust, and we said, hey, what's going on here that these people are using it for allergies? And what we figured out is that one of the things that xylitol does is it speeds up the mucociliary clearance cycle. In your nose, you have a film of mucus and underneath that is cilia, and the cilia are moving it along. And by making the snot less viscous, so it's more runny, it actually traps more of the dander and the pollen and these other triggers and washes them away so that you don't have a reaction to it because it gets it washed away fast enough.
Interesting. I might be trying that out here real soon, like within the next few weeks. I usually have allergies in the spring and the fall, so we're coming up on that time for me.
Well, hang on. Why are you going to wait until then? I mean, come on. The way that I explain this is, do you wait until you're sick to wash your hands?
The answer to that question is no, I don't.
Do you wait until you have a cavity to brush your teeth?
The answer to that question is no, I don't.
Okay. Do you wait until you really stink bad and no one wants to be by you to take a shower?
Only if I've been out in the woods.
Okay. So you don't wait until you're congested. You don't wait. It's a nasal hygiene product. It's simply, all it's doing is it's washing out bacteria, viruses, pollen, dander, all of this stuff. It's washing that out of your upper airway so that it doesn't get further and it doesn't affect you.
Then I'm going to have to be getting that sooner than a couple weeks from now. All right. So let's get into 2000. You form the company. You've got these studies. And then you start doing scientific studies of your own, correct?
So the first study that we did, and so this is actually interesting, and I really haven't talked about this that much, but in 2000 we started the company, and we put an ad out in one of the publications, and we said, here's a nasal spray that's going to help with ear infections in babies. Okay, I'm an underwater welder. I didn't understand what we were doing. I just said, hey, my dad says this is what it does. He's a doctor. We put the ad out. We get a letter from the FTC in 2000. Maybe 2001. And they said, hey, you need to contact us. You need to call us here. And I called them. And what they did is they said, do you have any studies that are published backing up what your ad says? And I said, well, no, but my dad was a doctor and he had all this. And they said, well, you can't make that claim until you have a study that's published. But once you have a study that's published, you can make that claim. But if you make the claim that it prevents or treats an infection, well, then the FDA might get after you for making a drug claim. But the FTC won't get after you for that because you have a study backing it up. That's where the two, come together. So we understood, and after a 45-minute, a very polite and very informative 45-minute, an hour-long conversation, we knew what the ground rules were, and we went forward. We never made any claims again. In 20 years after that, we never had any issues with the government. And we had a graph on the side of our box of product. In fact, I'm going to show it to you right there. Okay, and it shows how it blocks bacterial adhesion of those three pathogens. And we've been saying that and talking about that for 20 years. And nobody's ever said anything. And in 2020, we know, so let me go back. In 2005, we actually went and hired a group of medical researchers to do a study on how xylitol prevents ear infections. Mm-hmm. They went and did a study. It was an RCT study. We had it all drawn up. We had all the data.
For my audience.
Sorry, random controlled trial.
Okay, random controlled trial. Okay.
It's the way they test all the drugs and the medicines. So we went and had that done. We had it all drawn up. We had the data. We went and took it to one of the pediatric journals. And the editor-in-chief of that pediatric journal, and I apologize, I don't remember which one it was. Again, that's 18 years ago. I wish I remembered it. But that editor refused to publish it because he said, in my expert opinion, there's no way that spraying sugar water up your nose is going to reduce ear infections and respiratory infections by 85%. Okay, which is what the study showed. So he refused to publish it because he didn't like the data. He didn't believe the data.
That is ridiculous.
So, well, the whole system of that is ridiculous. Okay. Anyways, so we never did any studies after that because if you can't get them published, what's the point of doing it? So then it comes to 2020, and we all know what hit the fan in 2020. Okay. That's when COVID came around.
COVID, right.
And we were selling the product. I mean, you can buy it in CVS, you can buy it at Walgreens, you can buy it at Target, you can buy it at Walmart, you can buy it everywhere. Okay, it's not like it's, some product that's, loony or something. You can buy it everywhere. You can go into South Africa and buy it. You can go to the UK and buy it. You can buy it in Australia. I mean, you can buy it all over. But in 2020, when COVID happened, it's a virus. We had never, ever looked at a virus. We'd never even thought to look at a virus. And shame on us for having not ever thought to look at it. But in early 2020, March, we had started having some pulmonologists that were treating COVID patients call us and say, hey, you should look at what this is doing to the virus because something in there is working on my patients. So we sent it up to Utah State University. It has a very good virology lab, but they had the SARS-CoV-2 virus. They tested it, and something in it was destroying, annihilating the virus, just annihilating it. And originally we thought it was a xylitol, but in the end, what it was the grapefruit seed extract that we use as a preservative at a 0.2% was destroying the SARS-CoV-2 virus as effectively as a 70% solution of alcohol.
Wow.
Okay. So if you're breathing something in and you have something that kills it in your snot, in your mucus, it's going to kill the virus. Okay. About a month later, after that, in April, May of 2020, there was a paper that came out of University of Tennessee. And what it showed is that xylitol, the same way it blocked strep pneumo, H2, MCAT, and staph, but we've known that for 20 years, it was also blocking SARS-CoV-2 to an undetectable level. And once you understand that, you're like, well, if it blocks adhesion, it's going to reduce, at this point, we don't know what percentage, but we know that it's going to be effective at reducing COVID. Okay. We sent all this information to the government. We sent it to the CDC. At this point, everything was still going crazy. It was still a crap show. We sent all that information up to the government. They ignored it. We sent it to the CDC. They ignored it. We sent it to the FDA. They ignored it.
Which government, may I ask? The federal government, the state government?
The federal.
Okay.
Well, we sent it to both, but at this point, we were sending it to the federal government. Okay. And so we sent it to him and nothing happened. And we had a pulmonologist that was treating COVID patients that was offering and willing to do a study on people with COVID. We submitted the papers he submitted the papers in June of 2020. And in July of 2020, the FTC sent us a warning letter and said, don't be sharing any of this data. Okay. And one of the other things that I should point out is that even prior to 2020, the CDC on its webpage said and had guidance for people with respiratory coronavirus infections. And that guidance was to use salt water, saline, to physically reduce the viral load in the upper airway. And by doing that, you would reduce the severity and the longevity of your respiratory coronavirus infection. That's, we've been doing that for decades, hundreds of years, thousands of years. People have been using salt water to clean out their airway.
Right.
And in May of 2020, a study done at Vanderbilt University showed that yes, indeed, what worked for respiratory coronavirus infections prior to 2020 still worked post 2020. Okay, they had a study with 60 people over the age of 65. Every single one of them had COVID, tested positive, had symptoms. Every single one of them started using salt water, and 100% of them were better in under a week.
Wow.
And that is some of the data that the FTC sent us a warning letter not to share. And they sent a warning letter to NeilMed, and they sent one to Navage, and they sent one to everybody else that was trying to share that data about salt water.
Why is now the FTC is sending a warning letter because I'm guessing you guys are making a claim or someone's making a claim about this. And so therefore they're saying if you make false claims, that's their purview that they can go after people, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So
but hang on, I want to clarify this because they said we were making false claims, but yet we had the CDC's webpage telling us that we weren't. We had studies from Vanderbilt telling us that we weren't. We had studies from the University of Tennessee telling us that we weren't. And we had studies from Utah State University telling us that we weren't. But the FTC came back and said, well, we don't like those studies. We found out later that they don't like them because they didn't even open them.
Okay, so not only the fact that they didn't open them also makes me go, why are you guys, if you're not opening them, you don't know. And even if you don't know and someone's making a claim, but they've got studies to prove it, okay, so you don't want to open it up, so you don't leave someone alone if you don't want to do the background work.
I can't answer that question. I think you should invite the FTC agents that did the investigation onto your show and ask them those questions. Because we asked those questions when they were being deposed and they wouldn't answer them.
They wouldn't answer a question under deposition?
Yeah. They said, oh, that's privileged.
So what happens when, okay, so this is one thing that bothers the crap out of me when it comes to the government. You, Joe Q citizen, or me, Joe Q citizen, says to the government, that's privileged information, or, you're not authorized to receive that, or that's, their answer to you is, we're going to throw you in the gulag if you don't give us the answer we want. Or we're going to sue, we're going to destroy your business by lawsuit, or whatever the case may be. Why do they get to say that's privileged information it's immoral. It's immoral.
I agree 100%. I think it's immoral. I never realized I'm going to call it what I think it is, which is corruption. Before this happened, I never realized the corruption that is going on in the DOJ and in our government, because they have such a superior position when they go out and sue somebody. It's not, people refer to this David and Goliath thing. It's not David and Goliath. It's four Goliaths on road rage, on roid rage. Sorry, it's four Goliaths on roid rage, and an infant baby that's a week old, because they have all the money. They're not spending their own money. They don't care whether, anything. I mean, they have no empathy. They don't care. I mean, with our case, we can literally show you how what they did caused the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people in the United States and cost our country trillions of dollars. Okay, again, in May of 2020, we knew from the University of Tennessee, or the Vanderbilt study, that just using a couple cents of salt water made COVID a non-issue. And when companies tried to share that data, the FTC shut them down.
Kind of makes you wonder if somebody's getting some money off of that.
That I don't know, because the FTC didn't want to share that.
Part of the privileged information is what I would guess.
Probably.
So, okay, so let me ask you this question. Do you know the answer to this? Do the individual agents and attorneys get some type of bonus from any of the suits that they win?
I don't know the answer to that. I really don't.
I wish I knew the answer, because within different branches of the government, within these different organizations, when there's a lawsuit done and won, my understanding is that the federal agents do have a tendency to get bonuses based off of winning cases. And I'm pulling that out of a memory hole where I'm like, oh, well, I don't have the exact name.
When you understand how much the odds are stacked in their favor, the government wins 98% of the time. That's how much they win.
Right.
Okay. If it was a level playing field, I think they would win 2% of the time. I truly do. Because some of the attorneys that we're working with, they're going to get mad at me for saying this, because I know they watch everything I do, because they're trying to find something I say that's false and misleading. And maybe this is, but if those guys were playing on a level playing field, they'd maybe win 2% of their cases. I mean, I'm sitting there, and as I'm being deposed by them, I'm having a hard time not laughing, because I think that my 13-year-old daughter could do a deposition just as well.
Interesting.
And probably ask more meaningful questions.
Well, let's get into you having the letter sent, them going after you, and some of the background of why we think that may have happened, because you all of a sudden had a little bit of an awakening in 2000 with the COVID scenario. 2020, sorry.
Yes.
2020, correct. So back in 2020, you had a little bit of awakening going, something's rotten in Denmark. And you started reaching.
You don't have to go that far. It was something's rotten in Washington.
And here in Utah on some level. Okay.
Yes.
So you put out a tweet saying your thoughts and opinion using your First Amendment. And is that when it showed up?
I don't know that we had a Twitter account then. We really don't know how the FTC actually, how we came on their radar screen. They've refused to acknowledge that. In fact, in everything that they've given us, from what we can ascertain, the very first time that we popped up on their radar was when they had to sign a warning letter going out to us.
And the warning letter was?
Stop talking about saline, stop talking about and sharing published research data.
Okay. Then you started to find out that the government was lying to you. And you decided to start sharing.
Well, hang on. I don't know that I would say they were lying. They were just being incredibly deceitful. Okay. And there's a fine line. And I think that those lawyers in the FTC can walk it pretty well, because they've been doing it for 20 years.
Right.
But no, so what happened is normally what the FTC does is they'll send you a letter, not a warning letter, like they did in 2000. They send you a letter and say, hey, please reach out to us. You're making some claims that we think are egregious and unsubstantiated and false and misleading. And we never got one of those. Okay. They went right to the nuclear bomb, I guess, or the atom bomb, and sent us a warning letter. And they published it in the media, and they shared it with all the media here in Utah. And I want to commend the media here in Utah for doing such a phenomenal job of completely ignoring Xlear and our side of that story, because none of them called us. None of them, said, hey, what's the other side of this story?
Okay. Did they share the letter and what the letter said in the local media?
I don't know that they said that. They just said, hey, this Xlear company is making false claims about how their nasal spray, or any nasal spray, because we were never talking about just ours. We were talking about nasal hygiene in general. Okay, we were talking about saline. We were talking about nitric oxide. We were talking about baby shampoo. We were talking about chlorpheniramine, obviously xylitol, iota-carrageenan. There's a plethora of nasal sprays that we know have a positive effect on COVID.
Okay, so what happened after the media shared that about your business?
Nothing. I mean, here in Utah, we thought it would be a big negative, and it wasn't anything. But what did happen nationally was we had a whole bunch of people start buying our product like crazy. Okay, and I hate to say this, but we sat there and said, what's going on here? And the sales kept going up, and then they dropped off for a while. And the reason why is, we understood it because we reached out to some of our customers. Is all of our current customers went out and bought out everything they could buy because they thought the FTC would try to shut us down.
Right.
But yet at the same time, we started getting some big podcasts out there. There's one out there, and I want to give them a shout out, called Investigate Earth, where they, they'll find out something and they'll go investigate it. But as soon as the FTC sent us a warning letter, they said on their show, we have to talk to this guy because if the government's trying to shut it down, it probably works.
There's a smart podcaster,
and so I've actually been on his podcast a couple of times now, and I mean it's a great podcast, and it's Investigator. I mean, it is great. They talk about a lot of things, but then the sales kind of trickled off because, you have you start buying a bottle. One bottle of product lasts you 2 months. And then it started going again. And then nothing, it was just regular consistent growth until the FTC sued us, but that's, further down. But what's really interesting is I showed you that graph earlier about xylitol, how it blocks the pathogens from adhering.
Right.
Okay. That's been on our box for 20 plus years. The FTC, while we were trying to figure out a way to settle their warning letter and their complaint, what we did is we said, hey, here's the study. It's done at the University of Tennessee, and it shows that xylitol blocks adhesion. They said, well, that's not human airway tissue. And we're like, well, okay, so varroa kidney monkey tissue is the standard for the pharmaceutical industry, and you want to hold us to a higher standard than a pharmaceutical company. They said, well, we're not here to tell you that. We're just here to tell you what you have to do. So we went out and we did a study looking at human airway tissue and how xylitol blocks adhesion. And we also looked at a couple of other pathogens. We looked at rhinovirus. We looked at H1N1, the flu. We looked at RSV. We looked at SARS-CoV-2, the Delta strain. Or maybe it was the Omicron. I can't remember. I think it was Omicron. But we looked at that, and xylitol had zero effect on a rhinovirus. Didn't block it. Okay? It blocked SARS-CoV-2, it blocked H1N1, and it blocked RSV. We sent that study to the FTC. We're on the phone with them. And for everybody that lives here in Utah, I was on a boat in the middle of Lake Powell trying to find a good signal while I was on the phone trying to negotiate with the FTC. And we shared that, and the FTC said, we don't care And I said, well, can we make a statement about how xylitol blocks adhesion of RSV? Yeah, sure. We're not going to come after you for that. H1N1. Yeah, sure. We're not going to come after you for that. SARS-CoV-2. No, you can't say that. It's the same study. So these guys, the people for the FTC, at that point, I realized they didn't care about the science. This was a personal vendetta that they were trying to do. If they cared about the science, it would be, no, you can't do that, because even though we told you this is what you needed to do, now we're telling you something else. We're going to move the goalpost again over to, we're going to move it over to that country you said earlier. The Netherlands, Denmark.
Yes.
Denmark. We're going to move the goalpost over to Denmark. And so at that point, I'm sitting there saying, okay, so this is a study. It's one study. We're looking at 3 things and how it affects these viruses. And you're saying I can say this one and this one, but not this one? Okay, that's not science. Okay, that's personal vendetta stuff.
So where do you think that personal vendetta came from?
I think it came because I actually stood up to them. When they sent out all the warning letters, when they sent them to me, to NeilMed, to Navaj, and all these other ones, everybody else said, yeah, okay, we won't fight. We'll do whatever you tell us to do. We're your obedient servants. And I was like, no, this is the data. This is what the science shows. There's people dropping like flies. This is the FTC's words. That's what they said. I don't think people were dropping like flies. But they said, people are dying. We're having a national disaster. We need to talk about hygiene and how these hygiene options work. And so I kept talking about it.
And you've got an option that's working.
Absolutely.
Okay, so...
Oh, and so let me add one other part to this. I even shared with them a book that was published prior to COVID. And it's an interesting book, but this tells you the sorry state of our public health when it came to how they responded to COVID. It's a book, and it's called, what's it called? Pandemic Century. And what it points out is that during the past 100 years in the United States, roughly every 10 years, we have an epidemic. And every single one of those epidemics, without fail, have been solved not by pharmaceuticals, not by vaccines. They have been solved by improvements in hygiene and sanitation. Every single one. But yet when COVID came around, all of that was thrown out the window, and we're not going to do anything. We're going to tell you to go home and stay home until you're deathly ill, then go to the doctor. And until we have a vaccine, that's the only thing we're going to tell you to do.
And get remdesivir. I know it's not remdesivir. Remdesivir.
It's run death is near.
Yes. And as soon as you get put on it, you even become nearer to death. The mortality rate for that drug is like through the roof. And Fauci made a little chunk of money off of it. Okay, so let's get into when they really started going after you. They're coming after you. You're having this conversation. What comes at the end of that conversation? How does it wind up being resolved?
The one where I was on the boat?
Yeah.
As soon as they said that, and as soon as they gave me that answer, I was on a cell phone, but I still texted the attorneys that I was working with and said, cut this off. These guys, they have no interest in settling. They have no interest in anything intelligent. They don't have any interest in an intelligent solution. At this point, it's a personal beef. Let them sue us.
So what happened then? So
they sued us.
And what happened when that lawsuit came? You decided, hey, let's fight this.
Well, once the lawsuit comes, you don't have a choice.
Right. My question is, where has the state of Utah been in this? Because my guess is, I'm going to assume that there's been some communication between the FTC and the state.
As far as I know, there hasn't been.
Oh, interesting.
If there has been, then the FTC should have given that to us, and they haven't.
So my point from that is,
Why wasn't there?
Why wasn't that happening? So
I don't know.
So when I heard this story, the thing that started to get me angry about this is, where is our government officials? You're being sued. This is a place where the attorney general needs to step in, where the governor of our state needs to step in, where the county sheriff needs to step in and say, listen, you've got a lawsuit if you're going to put a lawsuit against one of our citizens here in the state of Utah, we want you to come to us and tell us what's going on. And not only you're a citizen, but you're a significant business here in Utah County. It's not like
I don't know about significant.
Well, you're not the biggest business, but you're significant. You've been around for 20 years. You're employing people. There's many people that are employed and derive an income because of what you do. On top of and then let's just say that let's say you were producing chocolates, okay?
Oh, then they'd be all over it.
Probably true. But on top of that, you're doing something that's helping people be healthier. You're doing something that's promoting.
I believe
health.
so.
And on top of that, so if you've got something that can help mitigate COVID-2 during the middle of our pandemic, while we have our students wearing masks, we've got kids wearing masks. We're destroying their education because they're not in school. Many of the schools don't go, right around.
By the way, can I add something here?
Absolutely.
Do you know what's way more effective than a mask at preventing COVID?
Tell me. I think I know, but tell me.
Pretty much any nasal spray that you can buy that has something in it that is going to block adhesion or destroy the virus. Saline isn't going to do that much. Nitric oxide would. Okay. The studies that were done, when we tried to do a study here in the US and the FDA said no, there were other compounds that were tested. The one with iota-carrageenan, which is a seaweed extract. They did a study on hospital workers in Argentina. Again, this is not a product that we make. They did a study in Argentina, and they showed an 80% reduction in transmission of COVID. Okay? They did a group in the UK did a study in India where they used a xylitol nasal spray. And using half of the amount of xylitol and using it 3 times a day, the hospital workers that were treating COVID patients during the Delta wave in India, so very arguably the deadliest part of the pandemic at the deadliest place,
right.
Those people had 62% fewer cases of COVID than the people who were using the placebo, the saline placebo. And we've already had the discussion that we know that saline reduces COVID by a significant amount. But the xylitol reduced it 62% above and beyond that.
So I have a question. Did you reach out to people within the state of Utah to let them know, hey, I've got this product?
100%.
So did you reach out to people in the health, within the health side of?
We reached out to Angela Dunn and
Angela
well, let's not question her intelligence, but we reached out to her and we sent her the studies, and we offered to give the state of Utah, I can't remember how many bottles. I think it was 100,000 bottles. Okay. But a significant amount of bottles of product, because she said her answer was, is it FDA approved? Which it's a cosmetic. It's not a drug. It is approved. Well, is it approved to treat COVID? Well, it's not a drug, so it's not approved to treat COVID. Well, and I don't want any interest. I have no interest. None at all. Because I'm a doctor and I understand pharmaceuticals, and if I can't drug you, stab you, or cut you, then I'm not interested in learning about it. But she refused to even allow us to give the state a bunch, because if they had really been inquisitive of ways to stop it, they would have said, okay, we know from thousands of years of people, using saline and nasal irrigation and 20 years with xylitol specifically, that it's safe. There's not going to be any bad side effects. We should try it. And what we suggested is that they pick one of their random, stations where they were having people drive up and swab their nose and say, hey, you think you've been exposed? Here's a bottle. Use this 3 times a day. And all you had to do was look at the data 2 weeks later and see how many people from station A were admitted to the hospital and how many people from station B, and you'd have a decent answer as to whether or not it worked. They refused it.
And this is another thing that gets my blood boiling. We pay Angela Dunn. We pay her health.
What was her name again?
Angela.
No, I'm kidding.
Yes, dumb is a part you could, and you aren't the first one that has brought that up. But Angela Dunn and we have the health department where we pay millions of dollars a year. The state of Utah, taxpayer dollars go to fund them, and you have scientific studies that show that there is a possibility, and she's not even willing to look at it because she's a medical doctor and she hasn't had hundreds of hours of studies. The pharmaceuticals have told her, we do not want to look at things like your product. So this is where I start, as I'm hearing your story on a couple of words, my blood is just starting to boil.
Everything that happened in COVID, the thing that got my blood boiling the most, and I think I mentioned this to you, but it's not the nasal spray. It's that we went to the state public health department and we went and we said, hey, you know what? We're going to throw away about $750,000 worth of chewing gum, xylitol chewing gum. Remember I told you this?
Right.
And we're going to throw it away. We're going to put it in the dumpster because people aren't buying it because they're not standing at the cash register. And so it's not selling. They're buying the bigger bottles online. So we're throwing this away. We went to the schools and they said, well, if the public health department will say we can do it. We went to the public health department and we were on a phone call with them, a video call just like this. And I'm sitting here with a doctor who's, both of us are in our 50s. And it was a young lady. I can't remember her name. I wish I could remember her name. But she sat there and she said, yeah, okay, yeah, we know about xylitol. We know what it does. And if you donate it to a school or two where they have a lot of tooth decay, a lot of where kids are on Medicaid, where the state's paying for their health care, and it works at reducing tooth decay and respiratory infections, who's going to pay for the gum the next year? And I said, well, if you reduce tooth decay to practically zero, and you reduce respiratory infections by 42%, which is what the studies show, the state would be in their best interest to continue to do that. And she just said, well, in my expert opinion, I think it's more important that we keep the funds and the money for the doctors and the dentists to come in and see these poor children after their teeth are rotted away and they're sick than it is to spend any money on prevention. And to me, these are children we're talking about. These are little kids that are born into families that can't afford health care. And the state, if they chipped in $25 a year per child, would they get rid of tooth decay and they'd reduce respiratory infections by 42%? And our public health department said no.
That was another area where I got really, really, really frustrated. So, and she said, in my expert opinion, I would love to know what exactly gives her that expertise.
Well, let me tell you, on my side of the table, we had double the expertise than what her entire life was. Okay, yeah. Because she was in her mid-20s, maybe. And she's sitting here talking to dentists who are retired now from Northwestern University where they're teaching this stuff. And, you know, me, I've been in this industry for 25 years. I think I understand. I have a good idea about oral and nasal hygiene.
Okay. So this has been shared with our public health. This has been shared with our government officials. There's even, so did you get to any of our elected officials and share this in any of this information with them? And I'm not going to ask you to name names. Oh, one other thing we had talked about, I was going to check in with you at 50 minutes. We're over 50 minutes. I'm assuming you want to continue going, but you do have a hard out at 5:30. So,
I do. So
okay.
we have 20 minutes.
Okay. So where did you
go Jazz? Go Jazz.
Did we have any conversations with any of our elected officials?
Local in the state or in the federal?
Both.
So I actually met with most of our federal delegation. None of them did anything, but I did meet with most of them except my congressman, John Curtis. Is it John Curtis? Yeah.
I believe
John Curtis.
Yes.
I mean, he's my congressman, and he would never, I mean, we went out there, we tried to get appointments. He would never talk to us. We did meet with our senators, staff from their team, but none of them ever did anything. The congresswoman that did something was actually Nancy Mace from South Carolina. And when I told her this and I shared the data with her, and she looked at it and she had her medical advisor there, and our medical advisor goes, well, it makes sense to me. She actually wrote a letter to Secretary Becerra over HHS, Health and Human Services, and asked why, with all of this data, and even the CDC's webpage saying the best way to treat a respiratory coronavirus infection, why is it that they're suing a company, and why is it that the Health and Human Services isn't even talking about it?
And what was the response back?
What do you mean? What response?
That's my point.
Dude, the executive branch does not respond.
That's my point. That's my point. There was
Come on, they're way above that.
Right. But that if there's anything that they should have, this is the thing that frustrates me. You gave this information to the state of Utah. You gave this to congressional leaders. I understand that maybe some of them didn't quite catch the vision, but you did give it to a congressman that actually reached out to one of these organizations and said, hey, why aren't we doing something? Because this is during the time that we're hearing hundreds of people are dying. They're giving us death numbers on TV.
Correct.
Okay. Thousands of people are dying a day, supposedly. We're on our path to over 1 million people are dying. Schools being shut down.
You know, one of our elected officials here, what's his name? I'm thinking Bennett. It's not Bennett. It's
Romney or
no, local state senators, Congress representatives. He's from Spanish Fork.
Oh, Jeff Burton.
Okay. So to his credit, and I'm saying this in a good way, Jeff, if you hear this, and early on in COVID, he was in charge of the governor's task force. And
so
we sent
time before he was a state representative, just for people
correct,
to understand,
before he was elected.
He was brought in, asked by Governor Herbert he had been general within the Guard, and he was asked by Governor Herbert to be on the health board, meeting with Angela Dunn, meeting with Spencer Cox. Continue.
Yes, and I actually got on the phone. He actually called me, and we got on the phone and we had a conversation. And the interesting part of it is the very first thing he said when we got on the phone was, and you have to understand that when I was in the Guard, my a couple ranks up was Burton. Okay, so we got on the phone, and the first thing he says is, "Hey, Mr. Jones, I want to thank you." And I said, "First, don't call me Mr. Jones." But the very first thing he said is, he goes, I want to thank you for making your product. I used to get sick. And someone, when I was deployed, and I can't remember if it was Afghanistan or Iraq, but we were deployed, they told me about it. I ordered some, and I've been using it ever since, and I don't get sick as much. So then I said, okay, so let me tell you about the studies and how it affects COVID. And I shared the studies with him. I shared the data, okay? And him not being a doctor, educated and indoctrinated by the pharmaceutical model, he says, you know what? That makes sense. Let me see what I can do. And he's the one who used that phrase that I used earlier. He goes, but don't hold your breath, because I'm going to have to get this past the doctors. And if they can't cut you, stab you, or drug you, they're usually not interested. And he's right.
How ridiculous is that? How ridiculous is that?
It is ridiculous. But that's the way that our medical establishment is. And I mean, if I should have had a whiteboard here to show you this. I drew that a diagram for you on a napkin when we were having lunch. But if you take, you know, you're perfectly healthy here and you're perfectly dead here, and you draw a graph, you know, over here is where doctors are educated, because you get sick right here. It's hard to do it without a graph.
Right.
But the money and the time and the effort that you spend when you're healthy to keep healthy and to stay healthy is pennies on the dollar compared to what it costs to treat you once you're sick. But yet our public health agencies have been so bought into the pharmaceutical industry and so bought into the MD industry, to the medical doctor industry, that they don't do anything over here to keep us healthy. They're not going into the schools and teaching us how to brush our teeth. They're not going into the schools and teaching us how to wash our hands and explaining why those are important things to do. They're not teaching us nutrition.
And then they tell, they have public health mandates, don't go to the hospital until...
Not only that, they have public health mandates saying, don't go outside and walk around, sit on the sofa and order pizza.
So
actually, it wasn't quite that bad, but it was the gist.
You're not off either, because you had to get many people had to get the food brought into them, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I have someone in my family that wound up dying. So he wasn't sick enough. He needed to have a medical procedure done, and he had had a couple of heart attacks, and he needed to have some work done on him. He needed to have a procedure, but because it wasn't, you know, he wasn't on death's door, they didn't say it was absolutely mandatory that he get it done. He wound up, I think, dying somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 year to 2 years early, and the last part of his life was very difficult. That is a story that's happened with many people. We were told, do not go into the hospital until basically you're on death's door and having a hard time breathing. And that's
a shame.
And that's when people were going to wind up dying, and then they could attribute it to the numbers, and that's why our numbers were so jacked up. We weren't taking care of this. So had people had your nasal spray, and had people been taking...
Well, hang on, and I want to clarify this. I'm not talking about our nasal spray. I'm talking about the whole idea of nasal hygiene.
Right.
Okay. There's other products out there, and I would tell people, I mean, obviously ours is best because it's ours. It's right. What we do. But I want to educate people as to why. I mean, public health has abdicated their job in teaching people and educating people as to why oral and nasal hygiene is important. Okay, nasal hygiene. I want you to think for a minute. Where does the vast majority of pathogens enter our body?
Through our nose.
Through our nose and our mouth. Okay, that's where we get sick from. So we wash our hands and we brush our teeth. Why is it such a big leap to wash our nose? Why is it such a big leap and say, you know what? Most of the times we get sick. Most of the times, over half of the times that people in the United States go to see a doctor, it's for something that's starting right there in their nose. Why is it so hard for us to understand that we should wash our nose, that we should use something that blocks the adhesion of these pathogens, that we should use something that should kill these pathogens in our nose.
Well, I'm going to say there's two reasons behind it. One, it's something that we haven't done. And then two, you can't have pharma making their money. And then pharma can't be paying out money to advertisers, and they can't be donating to people's campaigns. Money, money, money. Yes.
It's
absolutely.
the money.
Yes.
And so, and to go back to this, during the early days of COVID in 2020, and this ties in oral hygiene, but in early 2020, there was a couple of papers, one came out of Israel, one came out of Canada, where they showed that if people had periodontal disease, which is just inflammation of the gums, it's a catch-all term for, not good health in their mouth. But they showed that people that had periodontal disease were 8 times, not 8%, 8 times more likely to be hospitalized and die from COVID if they got it.
Wow.
Than people that didn't have perio. Okay, we knew that. Those studies are out there. Just go Google them. They'll show up. The crazy part of that is that our Surgeon General, that our CDC, our public health agencies, they should have looked at that. I mean, I did. They should have looked at that and said, hey, this is a great opportunity for us to encourage people to brush their teeth a little bit better. Nothing. Stay home and eat pizza.
Okay, so once again, I'm going to go back to my frustration. Why wasn't Spencer Cox coming to you? Why wasn't Angela Dunn coming to you? Why wasn't Governor Herbert coming to you? Why weren't our local state representatives coming to you and saying, Nate, you've got a product made here locally in the state of Utah. The government's coming after you and giving you trouble, but you've got studies that show your product helps solves these issues. How can we team up with you and your attorneys to, one, help you tell the government you're not coming and attacking one of our businesses and causing problems with them, and two, we need to get this out to the public so we can get kids back into school. Even if we believe that the masks were good at one period of time, keeping kids out of school and keeping people were home at one time was better than people dying, which it wasn't. People actually are long-term. We have yet to see all the problems that we faced. I just gave one anecdote of a personal life story. Yes, I'm sorry. There were people that died with COVID, but one of the reasons why they died with COVID is because they couldn't go to the hospital and get treated. They couldn't go and see their doctor and get treated.
It's because they listened to public health. They listened to the medical establishment. Okay? And we're not a pharmaceutical company, so doctors don't want to listen to us. And this isn't new. I mean, this has been going on for hundreds, if not thousands of years, that people educated in the healing arts don't want to listen to anything that's hygiene. And what I mean by that is you can look at the guy who first, his name is Ignaz Semmelweis, the guy that first suggested that doctors should wash their hands, between working on dead people and living people, women that were giving birth. Because they had a high mortality rate, almost 1 in 4, 25% of the women were dying in childbirth. And he just realized that if you wash his hands with bleach, then they didn't die. They didn't understand germ theory. In fact, what he thought he was doing was bleach smells so bad that it covers up the odor of the dead person. And he thought he was covering up the odor. But it worked. And the other doctors ran him out of town. They kicked him out of their organization, and he ended up dying a couple years later in an insane asylum because he couldn't come to grips that something so simple people refused to accept as a solution. People educated, whose job it was to protect the health of their patients, refused to accept something so simple. Okay, that's one example. John Snow, considered the father of epidemiology. Okay, in London, he came out and said, hey, you know what? All these people that are getting typhoid or cholera, all these people that are getting cholera, they're getting water from this pump. maybe we should stop letting people drink out of this pump. And the doctor's like, nah, you don't know what you're talking about. Again, they didn't have a good, solid understanding of germ theory. He famously went out and took the handle off the pump, and that was the last time London had a cholera epidemic.
Wow.
Okay? Again, the doctors, the establishment, ridiculed him. Another great example, Sarah Jo Baker, New York City. In the 19 teens, I guess, they hired her to go in. She was one of the first female doctors in the country. They hired her to go in and worked with poor kids in New York City, poor populations, because their kids were dying. And within a couple of months, just by teaching them how to wash their hands, teaching them basic hygiene and to boil their milk before they give it to the babies, they reduced the babies dying. I can't remember what it was, but it was a huge amount. And the doctors went and complained to the mayor and said, hey, the kids aren't getting sick. We don't have business. Kick her out. And the mayor refused to kick her out. And when she tried to get those programs put across the United States, the American Medical Association actually lobbied against it in Congress.
That is scary. So
it's terrible.
So what should you take away from this here, folks? What would I have you take away from this? One, sorry.
Go ahead.
Listener and myself, we need to make sure that our representatives know our name, know our face, and we have conversations with them on a regular basis. We need to hold them accountable, and then we need to say, listen, when you've got someone coming to you presenting a scientifically researched information on a way to beat a pathogen, and the bottom line is, we're going to have this happen again. I'm somewhat surprised we haven't had another illness come out to stop the election. Maybe they think they've got it.
We got 3 weeks.
Yeah, we got 3 weeks. True, we do. But we haven't. It's going to happen again. It's going to, whether it be another day, another year from now, another day, another week, another month, another year, or another 10 years, or another 20 years from now. It's going to happen again. We need to say liberty is the answer, and we need to listen to people that, especially within our own communities, that have scientifically researched things, and we need to demand of our public officials, especially our public health officials that we're paying money to. You need to look at things outside the established norm.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah,
there's a couple of things right there that you made me think of. One, I want to go back and revisit what the FTC is trying to do. And this isn't a secret, but what the FTC is trying to do, and they're trying to use us as the poster child, is they're trying to make it so that if you go and buy a vitamin C or vitamin D or an herbal supplement or anything of that nature, they're coming out now and saying that anybody that does that has to have two random controlled trials for each product. Okay? What that's going to do, if they push that through, if they're successful, is it's going to make your vitamins more expensive than your drugs, more expensive than your pharmaceuticals, because that is a standard that the FDA does not hold pharmaceuticals to. It's a much higher standard. There's a lot of OTC pharmaceuticals on the market that don't have any RCT studies backing up the data. Okay? The FTC is trying to hold the supplement industry, the nutraceutical industry, to a higher standard. So if anybody, and 80% of the people in the United States use supplements, but please reach out to your congressman and ask them and demand that they stop the FTC from implementing that program. Because that program, the irony is that the FTC's motto is protecting the American consumer, and what they're doing and what they've been doing is killing the American consumer. They've been harming the American consumer much more significantly than most of the companies that they've been going after.
I would concur with that. Okay, so we've got about 2.5 minutes left. what do you want to leave the audience with?
Just don't listen to your public health officials. They really are educated into pharmaceuticals, and those are for the doctors. Please encourage. I mean, if I had my druthers, if I was president for a day, I would pass a law that said that MDs, that physicians cannot work in public health, because once they start working in public health, it becomes pharmaceutical centric too, because that's the paradigm that they've been educated to. And we don't need that. But the second one is take control of your health. Don't listen, don't do, and don't, or I mean, if you want to do it, you can. I'm not encouraging you not to, but I think that you as the individual need to go and look at what they're telling you to do and say, does this work? Is it for me? Because there's a lot of things out there that might work for you that don't work for me. But take control of that and make sure that you're exercising, make sure that you're eating well, make sure that you're getting clean water and the garbage cleaned away from your house, and make sure you're practicing good hygiene. Make sure you're washing your nose, make sure you're brushing your teeth, taking a shower, that kind of stuff. If you want to cut down the amount of money that you spend on healthcare and drugs and pharmaceuticals, practice those 4 things right there, and it will cut down what you spend.
Well, let me say this, Nate Jones. I want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for the courtesy of your time and joining our audience today.
No worries, anytime.
I will. We need to do what we can to try to get your product more out to market. We, any way that I can be of assistance, and I look forward to hearing a little bit more. I hope you, frankly, I hope you smash the government.
Well, we've got a pretty good case. The FTC censored us, illegally censored us, and people died because of it.
I hope you smash them. That's what I'm going to leave.
That's the goal.
Nate, thank you for being the kind of guy that you are, willing to fight the fight, because as you shared, there were some other companies that they went to and said, boy, by the way, you need to step back off these claims. And they said, yes, sir, we will. Please don't go after us. Thank you for being willing to be the guy that said texted to your attorneys, we're taking this to the mat. So thank you so much, Nate, for joining us.
You're welcome. Anytime.
God bless you. Have a good one.
Okay, well, I'm going to go watch a Jazz game.
Enjoy.
So hopefully they win. I believe it's their opening game for the season. So let's go Jazz.
As opposed to, who are they playing against?
I have no idea.
Neither do I. And from 5 years ago, me 6 years ago would have never believed that I wouldn't know who the Jazz were playing on opening night. So take care. Thank you, my friend.
Who are the Jazz playing tonight? Nah. It's all good.
Take care. Have a good one. See you.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
All right, folks. I want to say thank you to Nate Jones for joining us. He's the founder of Xlear. You may want to take a look into his product. I can tell you, I'm going to be taking a look into his product as well. So I'm going to hit a couple of I don't have another guest, and we're going to be probably not ending just a little bit soon today, but there are some articles that I want to cover. And let me get to the that information. Just a moment. I did have some articles pulled up. All right. I've got a local story, and I am looking for that one. There we go. Governor Cox announced task force to combat skyrocketing fentanyl crisis in Utah. Misty Lopez grew up surrounded by a history of addiction that runs deeply on both sides of her family. Her dad was a heroin addict, and her mother struggled with methamphetamine addiction, according to Lopez, who said every member of her family was impacted by addiction in one way or another. Despite telling myself I'd never be like them, I eventually found myself walking the same path, she told reporters at Cottonwood Park on Tuesday. Uh, Cottonwood Park is in Salt Lake City, folks. Just so you know, heroin was my first escape, but fentanyl quickly followed. It was easy to get, too easy, in fact. Falling into the trap of fentanyl, a synthetic opioid that has exploded in popularity across the U.S. in recent years, was easy, she said, but getting out was much harder. Finding the drug is so easy, she explains. She could probably find someone selling it within 5 or 10 minutes, walking along the nearby Jordan Trail River. Lopez eventually found herself getting clean thanks to an arrest that landed her in drug court, which she described as a divine intervention. She now has been sober for over 3.5 years. Um, while Ms. Lopez's story is far from being a positive one. Many Utahns are not, or her story is a positive one, or at least the end is a positive one. Many Utahns are not so lucky. Utah Governor Spencer Cox said state troopers have seen a dramatic increase in fentanyl pills seized, and the state has seen a growing number of deaths by overdose. 6 years ago, in 2018, troopers recovered 1,600 doses of fentanyl, he said. In 2020, number that rose to about 15,000 before jumping to nearly 2 million last year. Now, let me ask you this. What's more, the governor announced a new statewide task force to combat the spread of fentanyl and address the root causes leading to the addiction, made up of political leaders at the state and local levels, law enforcement. Um, Cox said leaders are still grappling with how to adequately punish those charged with distributing illegal drugs without potentially doing more harm by leaving people with few employment or other options. He said the state drug court program has been really key and helpful. Uh, of the many ways the Biden administration border crisis, and this is a quote from Spencer Cox, the many ways the Biden administration border policies have been a failure, the fentanyl crisis is the most stark and dangerous, Cox said. That's not a partisan point of view, but a partisan point of view expressed to me by Democrat governors and Democrat members of Congress. Well, I will say this, Spencer Cox. We are a sanctuary state. At least we were announced as a sanctuary state. You had ICE come to you. The director of ICE for Salt Lake came to you and said, I'm going to say that Utah is a sanctuary state. You're not doing enough to fight that from coming in. We need to keep out the illegal immigrants. We need to keep them out from being bussed in from New York and flown in from Colorado. You need to say, we find you in the state of, you need to get with the state legislature and you need to say, if we catch you bringing in fentanyl into the state of Utah, there will be harsh penalties. You will be in jail for years. And folks, I'm going to go this far. If it's found that they're responsible for killing multiple people because of them overdosing, it's time to give them the death penalty. I think the death penalty to be brought upon those bringing drugs into the state of Utah, I think is more than it's more than fair to have those individuals be given the death penalty for their crimes. Let's get into. Let's see if I can play this video. So one thing that is, let's get into the national conversation a little bit now. We've got the Biden-Harris, well, not Biden-Harris, the Biden-Harris administration that is kicked aside old Joe, as it were, and now it's Kamala Harris running against Donald Trump. Recently, we've seen most of you have heard or seen the video that has men saying, "I'm a man and I vote for women," made by a bunch of gay dudes, acted in by a bunch of gay dudes. And we've also seen Barack Obama come out and call out black men. Well, guess what? Black men are coming out for Donald Trump and Republicans in high numbers. And I wanted to bring Pastor Lorenzo Swell has been a vocal and passionate supporter of President Donald Trump. In June, Pastor Swell hosted a roundtable with Trump to discuss what black voters in Michigan want out of a president, and he gave a powerful speech on the final night of the RNC. But he recently was on Fox, and I want to play this 3-minute clip from him being on Fox.
So with 3 weeks to the election, Kamala Harris is trying to shore up support among black male voters with new initiatives, including loans for black entrepreneurs and new regulations for cryptocurrency and legalizing marijuana nationally.
Underlying premise is not an assumption that I'm supposed to have black men in my back pocket in terms of their vote, and that I should be taking that for granted, because I don't.
Kind of seemed like even from your statement you do.
Black men are no different from anybody else. They expect that you have to earn their vote.
So why is she just doing it now? And today she'll be sitting down with Charlemagne the God in Detroit, a move our next guest says will not hit the mark with black voters in their city. Lorenzo Swell is a senior pastor at 180 Church in Detroit. He joins us now. He had the former president there as well, Donald Trump. Sir, thanks so much for joining the program.
Lawrence, I'm so Holy Ghost happy to be here with you this morning.
All right, Pastor. So tell me this. Is this going to work with black voters? I know that when it comes to black males, entrepreneurship is big for us. How is she going to overtax us? But then,
okay, real quickly, the two individuals, yes, they are black. Both the Fox News correspondent as well as the interviewee.
Loans as well.
I have never been so offended in my life. She's bringing a man here who is Charlemagne, a false god, to a community that has 4,500 churches, all people of faith. We are extremely offended that she's bringing a podcaster here to talk to black men about politics. She brought a retired athlete to Flint who is failing, Magic Johnson, and she brought Oprah to Oakland County as if she understands the plight and the pain of people that look like me. We will not allow virtue signaling. We will not allow identity politics. Black men are not political infants. We know exactly what's happening with the Democratic Party. We know that they've exploited us for over 6 decades. And we are saying, just like Moses said to Pharaoh, let my people go.
So, Pastor, tell me, what are you hearing from the folks that you're speaking to? I was in Detroit last week. I heard I had multiple conversations with voters, black males in the barbershop, and opinions from all over the political spectrum. But what are they telling you they want from a political candidate, a president?
They're saying they want a president that, number one, can help us with election integrity. We understand that in the city of Detroit, election integrity is an issue. The second thing, we want a president that can hold accountable our local and our state government from the resources that are already here. We already have federal funding through agencies like SBA, which President Donald Trump opened up that portal in a way that it has never been opened up in the history of the SBA, which, by the way, was started by Republicans. And we want a politician that's real, that wants to come here and listen to us. Vice President Harris, she's not spoken to any pastors. Vice President Harris, she continues to think that she can
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. She hasn't spoken with any pastors. Bottom line is, she lives her way in such a way that obviously she doesn't want to be around pastors because they might call her to repentance. Oh my heavens! Sorry, I couldn't resist that. That was, that was an easy one.
entertain her way to the black vote. We're offended, and we want her to be willing to actually bring real solutions to the complex problems that we're facing in urban America.
Yeah, black folks continue to say that we want to provide for our families, take care of our families. Whatever candidate that offers the best agenda for that is going to get the share of the vote. Pastor, thanks so much for doing the program.
All right, I'm going to be getting also to a few other stories. But I want to continue down this vein just a little bit. Kamala Harris, the bottom line is if she doesn't get black men, she's probably toast. Let's see if I can find. Here is, let me share with you folks. There's a few of you that may not have heard Barack Obama talking to black men.
Communities is that we have not yet seen the same kinds of energy and turnout in all.
Well, I won't be doing that because I'm not going to share that video. Because the bottom line is it's quite quiet. You can't hear it very well. But what he's telling is we don't have black men turning out on the same levels they did for me. Well, I think it might be because they started to realize what you were, Barack Obama, and that is a socialist Marxist who's destroying our country, and they want no part of it. So here's a couple of talking points from Kamala Harris and the Kamala Harris Waltz policy agenda. It was something given out officially by them. Kamala Harris will create an opportunity agenda for black men, provide 1 million in loans that are fully forgivable up to 20K for black entrepreneurs and others to start a business. If it's for black entrepreneurs, and what does it mean by others? But if it's for black individuals, that kind of goes against, isn't that racist in itself? Aren't there laws on the books that you're not supposed to do racism? Maybe. Support education, training, and mentorship programs that lead to good paying jobs for black men, including pathways to becoming teachers. I'm going to say, Kamala Harris, why aren't you doing these policies already? And didn't Donald Trump do something like that? Give more to historically black colleges than any other president has? Protect cryptocurrency investments so black men who make them know their money is safe. Launch a national health initiative focused on illnesses that disproportionately impact black men. Bottom line is, she is going out of her way because she knows if she doesn't get the black male vote, she has absolutely no chance in winning the election, or at least in a legitimate election. Let me be very clear on that one. I'm going to see if I can play something from Twitter, and let's see if it will pull up. Let's see.
As far as what happens next, the city says unless the property owners remedy every...
So this is about how Aurora had the... We're being told that Aurora, nope, you actually didn't have. We saw this on the news. We had a Republican that was they tried to fact check in real time, at least the Democrat mainstream media did, and said, oh, there were only a few instances of people and a few handful of apartment complexes where Americans were kicked out of their apartment. Well, here is one of those articles.
As far as what happens next, the city says unless the property owners remedy every single documented violation, the city will designate the building as unsafe due to its condition, not because of gangs.
So they're leaving it up to the city officials are going to condemn a building instead of actually having the law go out and take care of this scenario. So a violent Venezuelan gang, here's a story in regards to that. A violent Venezuelan gang members have taken taken over a few apartment complexes, according to Martha Raddatz, an Aurora, Colorado apartment employee at CBZ Management was beaten bloody by Venezuelan Tren de Aragua gang members for confronting them about taking over a vacant unit in the apartment complex. The worker had gone to inspect a recently vacated three-bedroom apartment, a rare occurrence for such a large unit, only to find a group of men already inside. When he refused their $500 bribe to overlook the situation, they brutally attacked him. CBZ management said the employee was brutally beaten and left bloody. Part of the attack was caught on a security film. So the bottom line is the police should be going and handling these situations. Why in the world here in the United States do we have to put up with people coming into our country, kicking out American citizens out of their own apartment? And on top of that, if they're not kicked out, they have to pay rent double rent. You'd have to pay rent to the rental company and you have to pay rent to the gangs. That's got to stop. Kamala Harris has also been caught. Oh, maybe I'll hit real quickly. Tim Waltz. That man has serious issues. He likes the LGBT community, and maybe he likes the LGBT community so much that the reason why he may have been let go from his teaching position, or at least he was given a leave of absence, might be because he was a little too cozy with a student. Who knows? And I find that lying and bad ethics on the Democrats is through the roof. Kamala Harris, speaking of bad ethics, was caught in a major plagiarism scandal by famed plagiarism hunter, stole from several sources, including Wikipedia, to writing important parts of her book. Kamala Harris' lack of original thought extends to the printed word, as she has been caught blatantly stealing others' work to write an important book. As you folks know, Harris' campaign was already crumbling thanks to several embarrassing interviews, awful campaign appearances, and Americans finally realizing she's just got no brains. That's my statement to the Gateway article. Now Harris is embroiled in a massive propaganda or plagiarism scandal. She had, I want to say, over 5 instances of plagiarism in a recent book that she wrote. Bottom line is, as JD Vance said, none of none of Kamala Harris's ideas are of her own, and she plagiarizes all of them, including Donald Trump's. All right, let's also hit. Bill Clinton said the quiet part out loud about Kamala's illegal alien invasion. I'm not exactly sure why they thought it was a good idea to get him to say this, but let me see if I can play this for you folks.
Letter, a new direction to manage.
I'm going to back that up and start over again.
A new direction to manage an immigration crisis in a tough time where there's all this upheaval all over the world, where there are border problems all over the world, where millions of people are trying to escape the misery they're in. And other people are saying, well, I want to do what I can and take what I can, but maybe there's a limit to how much we can do. In other words, I don't think Americans are anti-immigration, they're anti-chaos, right? They don't want us to do more than we can, but they recognize, at least most people do, we got the lowest birth rate we've had in well over 100 years. We're not at replacement level, which means we got to have somebody come here if we want to keep growing the economy. Unless one of you is one of these artificial intelligence geniuses and figured out how we can all grow with no work, which I'm not sure would be good for us. I think,
Well, let's also get to this quick statement made by Bill Clinton saying that, let's see if I can find it. It's not the video is not populating. Let's see if I can get it to repopulate by reloading it. I'm pushing. Here we go.
You had a case in Georgia not very long ago, didn't you? They made an ad about a young woman who'd been killed by an immigrant. Yeah, well, if they'd all been properly vetted, that probably wouldn't have happened. But if they're all properly vetted, and that doesn't happen, and America is not having enough babies to keep our populations up, so we need immigrants that have been vetted to do work, there wouldn't be a problem. And he couldn't keep people all torn up and upset.
Bill Clinton saying the quiet part out loud that Laken Riley would be alive today if the federal government had done its job in vetting and just keeping these individuals out. Was recently, Laken Riley was a University of Georgia student, was recently murdered by a Venezuelan illegal. The illegal alien who murdered her crossed the U.S. border on Joe and Kamala's open border invasion. We've got to stop that flow. We're letting in people we have no idea what their backgrounds are. Well, folks, I think if it was an honest election, I would predict that Donald Trump is going to win is going to wind up winning in a honest election. But let's bring up these numbers, and I'm going to play this video on how black men average of ages between 18 and 44 have voted historically and what may be happening now.
And sometimes there's a trend line now I never noticed before and make me go, whoa, this is one of them, all right? This is the Democratic margin among black men under the age of 45 in presidential elections. You go back to November of 2012, what do you see? You see Obama by 81. Clinton only won him by 63. Then we're all the way down to Biden last time around by 53. A tremendous drop already. And then you take a look at the average of the most recent polls, and Kamala Harris is up by only 41 points. That is about half the margin that Obama won them by back in November of 2012. And this, I think, is, when Barack Obama goes in last week when he was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, essentially talking to young black men, he made it seem like it was a Kamala Harris specific problem. This is part of a long-standing trend of young black men moving away from the Democratic Party, and Kamala Harris is just the latest to face that magnitude of younger black men going towards the Republicans.
That was what's most interesting here is the trend line and where some of the biggest drops happen or already happen in this case. How about black men overall?
How about black men overall? It's part of the same picture. You know, we're looking once again at younger black men. It looks like the worst Democratic performance since 1960, since JFK versus Richard Nixon. It's the same thing among black men overall. Again, part of a similar trend, but here actually the drop-off isn't as dramatic, right? Barack Obama won him by 85, then you see 71 with Clinton, 69, Biden, basically the same thing, holding steady. But here, again, very, very weak, only a 54-point margin. Now, again, still winning them by a large margin, but considerably lower than what we're used to, certainly considerably lower what we had during the Obama years. The bottom line is Kamala Harris with younger black men and then black men overall putting in historically weak performance for a Democratic
Is she
candidate.
getting any relief with black women?
All right. So, you know, we're talking about the trend line, right? And black women, look, she's doing better with black women than she is doing among black men. But here, there isn't a trend line almost until we get to Kamala Harris. So again, this is a black margin among black women. Look, Obama won him by 93, very large margin. Clinton won him by 93, a very large margin. Biden did a little bit worse at 85. But then you look here, and you get a 71-point margin. Now, again, these are large margins, but the bottom line is when you're talking about the base of the Democratic Party, you would think that Kamala Harris would do very well among black women based upon history, and of course she would be the first black woman president, but she's actually doing the worst for a Democratic candidate among black women since 1960, if this holds true.
And again, when you look at the numbers here, whenever you come in, looking at the trends is probably the most important thing.
You got it, my friend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sarah?
I think the and then also we were seeing similar types of trends with the Latino vote. There's a chance this year that Donald Trump might win more than half of the Latino vote. That would spell doom for the Democrat Party as well. The last story I'm going to finish up with. If you think that if you feel like you're being manipulated by the mainstream media, you probably are. Breaking news: the man accused of in the third, quote unquote, third assassination attempt. The third assassination attempt was in Florida at the Gulfway. Possibly an assassination attempt. Happened in Tucson, Arizona, where a bunch of people were on stage, lost their eyesight, and had the exact same similar conditions. 49-year-old Vern Miller was arrested near former President Donald Trump rally in Cocha, California, has spoken out denouncing claims of assassination attempt and blasting the fake news surrounding the incident. Miller, who called himself a staunch Trump supporter, was taken into custody after the Riverside County Sheriff's deputies found firearms in his vehicles. Now, he told them, according to him, I have firearms in the vehicle, and he does that at every rally he goes to. There are a bunch of pictures. Him with, this guy is a true Trump supporter. He's in a picture with RFK Jr. He's in a picture smiling with James O'Keefe. He's in a picture with Vivek Ramaswamy. The bottom line is this guy, he said he has been and has been in the same room even with Roger Stone, not Oliver Stone, with Roger Stone, as well as with Don Jr. and Don himself. So the Don himself. So once again, folks, we have to know that the mainstream media is going to do everything they can to lie and mislead us, and we need to do everything we can to try to ferret it out. So I'm glad I have a couple days removed from Saturday. But very quickly, even on Sunday, it was looking like the information might be that this guy was not who they claim him to be. In California, oh no, he might have a firearm. I guess that is apparently probably what wound up happening. So, folks, I want to say thank you to Nate Jones for joining me today. I want to say thank you to you for being here today, here on Main Street Media Utah. You can always watch these shows after they happen. I want to say thank you so much for being with me today. And I noticed I didn't have the chat up today. Darn it, shame on me. So look forward to talking to you next week. We'll see what guest we have on. I'm probably going to have Michael Letts bring us updates on what's been happening lately. And God bless. We'll talk to you later. Take care, my friends.